Good morning, and welcome to our Sunday worship service. I am Ben Silvernail, and I'll be your celebrant. I'm a WSU student living in Albion, Washington, with my girlfriend, Kat, and Rabbit. I'd like to extend a special welcome to all those who are joining us for the first time. We are very glad that you are here. If you come in person, you should have received a welcoming packet with an information card in it. If you fill that out and drop it in the offering basket, we will be in touch to support you finding your way into our community. If you are joining us online, there's a link on our website to an electronic version of the same card. Our welcoming committee members have yellow name tags and can answer any questions or point you toward additional information. Whether you are new or not, please consider staying for coffee and conversation after the service, either downstairs in our fellowship hall or in our Zoom room. And now, let's say our words of welcome together. Whether this is your first or your 1000th Sunday with us, and whether you strolled, rolled, Zoom, ran, or danced in, we are glad you chose to join us. We are one people of many beliefs, identities, origins, sexualities, and genders. All are welcome here. Now we will take a moment to say hello across the technical divide. First, we're going to show the people joining us on Zoom. If you are at home, please turn on your camera. Now, people at home, wave. Now, people who are attending the service in our building, it's your turn to wave. All right, we do have one announcement, and that is the snowshoeing event we have. It will be next Saturday at 1 p.m. at Field Springs State Park in Washington. You bring the snowshoes, we bring the fun, okay? We preface our service by acknowledging our church was built on the ancestral homelands of the Ninipu, called the Nez Perce by the French-speaking traders, the Palouse, and the Chichums, called the Coeur d'Alene. Let us pause and remember that we live on a ground that is sacred, ground that was stolen, and ground that cries out for justice and for responsible stewardship. May our remembering help us find the courage to do our part to restore wholeness to the earth and all her peoples. We are hoping that folks joining us via Zoom have a chalice or a candle to light and something to light it with. Let's light our chalices together. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share.
Please be seated. I think we're the same height. The microphone's in just the right spot. I am the Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Stevens, and I have the incredible privilege of serving this congregation as its minister. The process of collective evolution unfolds Through a series of intentional relationships, we connect compassionately, we listen deeply to one another, and we let stories of hurt or brokenness break us open. When we heal, we're a little wiser, a little more loving, and a little more aware of all of the ways in which we are interdependent, connected to one another and to all of life. Now, I choose the word intentional carefully because in my experience, and especially in today's climate, the cultural patterns of communication and interaction sometimes do more harm than good. So today we'll reflect together on what it takes to form and to nurture transforming relationships as individuals and as a community. Human beings are complicated. Relationships are often messy. Authenticity, intimacy, and vulnerability are so essential, but they can't and shouldn't be forced. However, there's a lot we can do to invite and support the kind of connections that change and heal us as individuals and as a collective. So let's begin by singing together. Number 346, Come Sing a Song. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
All right. Now I'd like to invite Mary Jo Hamilton to present our monthly Sundays check.
Hi, I'm here to represent the Month of Sundays Committee, and as you all know, we give all our cash in the offertory every month to a group that does good in our community. And this month, this is for January, our recipient is St. Vincent de Paul, And I have Marjorie and Larry O'Keefe from that organization that are here to accept a check. They've done this before, so it's nice to have them here to do it again. So we have collected for their organization $2,037.68. So. Thank you for that. And would you like to say a few words about? Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. We are so grateful for this support. Can I say a few words about St. Vincent de Paul and our situation? You may know St. Vincent de Paul in a broader context. You've helped us over the years, and that is so appreciated. Our particular St. Vincent de Paul council or conference only works in Latah County, although I have to say that we do have 3 young WSU students that have joined us quite recently, and so we're quite pleased with that. But in our situation, we're 100% volunteer. We do not have a store, do not have we have partners, I think is our best situation. And so we're 23 to 25 very active members. We meet once a week. We have a telephone that we share with the Moscow Food Bank. And that telephone provides us access to individuals and families that call in for help on various kinds of situations. We work at an emergency level, I would say. If a car is broke down or if somebody needs a car. One thing that's happened in the last few months, and I suppose with the pandemic as well, is we've kind of gotten into doing a lot of track phones for individuals that are being helped by, say, Family Promise or Sojourners or the Recovery Center, where apparently the monies that they are drawing on don't allow for people to have phones. But if there's individuals looking for work and that kind of thing, phones are kind of important. So it's been interesting to us that in the last several months we've been doing maybe 1 or 2 phones a week sometimes. It's kind of interesting. We work a lot with families as well on an emergency basis. Just a case or 2 I might share with you from the last couple of weeks. One is a situation where one of the local housing units with Section 8, where their housing costs are supported by the feds, I think, in that sense. So in this case, their housing for a family of 4 was about $490 a month, which is unbelievable in the housing situation in this area these days. But somehow they got the message that through the pandemic funds, their housing was going to be covered. Well, all of a sudden they were 4 months behind. And I think there had been some change in administration at that particular housing place as well. And so then once that got all figured out, they were facing eviction in the next day or 2. And so we did step in to support housing at a pretty good chunk of money. But then we partnered in that case with Family Promise. And so we often are partnering with those around. Did visit a young woman yesterday that had three foster children and 4 children of her own. Educated woman practicing as a teacher, but with some very significant medical issues that caused her to enter into a difficult family relationship and is trying to adjust and move on from where she is at with her medical conditions and with these 7 children. And so in those kind of cases, we're helping with the rent and the issues with supporting them about electricity and that kind of thing. And so
I think that we, through our Moms and Sundays program, also partner with some of those
exactly.
things in Family Promise and
Yes.
with Sojourners and
Yes.
Recovery Centers. So it's a network here that
So
we're
good.
talking about.
And we are so appreciative of your help.
Yes. Thank you very
And
much for coming today.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you. Now, let's take a moment to engage in the practice of generosity together. For those of you who are able to make a financial contribution, the logistics are on your screen. We typically give away all of our cash from our Sunday offering to local charities whose mission align with our values, a program we call Month of Sundays. This month, the recipient is the Laytop Recovery Center, whose mission is to support people in recovery from addictions and behavioral health disorders through peer-to-peer interaction and evidence-based practices to promote a healthy community. To donate, please indicate Month of Sundays on your check or from the online drop-down menu. In the spirit of love and for the continuing work of this church, we'll now take some time to practice generosity together.
Thank you. Though we'll soon share joys and sorrows from the lives of the members of our community, I want to take just a moment to light our candle of broader concern. And this morning I'd invite Elizabeth to light it for us on behalf of our trans and non-binary siblings here in Idaho and in other states where their basic rights are being threatened and their very existence is being criminalized. It's all awful, but I'm especially concerned about Idaho House Bill 71, which criminalizes gender-affirming care for minors. This flies in the face of so many peer-reviewed studies that clearly demonstrate that gender-affirming care saves lives. I honestly don't get it. I don't understand why it's so important to these extremists to try to control other people's sexuality and gender expression. But I do know it is wrong, and it is evil, and it does a lot of harm. People deserve to be cherished in the fullness of who they are, full stop. So, breathe with me. Breathe in the anger, the pain, and the sorrow. Breathe out love. Breathe out peace. Amen, and blessed be. And now I'd invite Rodney Fry forward to light candles, to lead us through the lighting of candles of joy and of sorrow. Thank you, Rodney. I invite you now into a time, well, this is just a prayer, so if you prefer to meditate, feel free, but into a time of prayer. This is prayer for a time in need of empathy by Tanya Cothran. Spirit of life, teach us to consider also how others experience the world, to understand how my reality and their reality are different, and yet they share qualities of the same core desire. Teach us to listen for shared feelings, for places of connection. Teach us to be curious and open to hearing differences. Teach us to love into brokenness, to give space for, to be patient with healing. Let us be strong in our vulnerability, in our not knowing, in exposing our less than perfect, scary bits to those in front of us. Give us courage to face judgment, scorn, and hatred because of the greater good. Let us be disciples of essential goodness, strong in our knowing that in each being there is a divine light of the soul. Give us the strength to keep feeling empathy, even when we are tired, even when we are broken. For it is in those moments, those very moments, that the world tips toward wholeness. In the silence, let us breathe and let our hearts open and let our spirits settle. I believe in the power of love to transform us and to heal us. Why? Because I see it happen all the time. All the time. In a congregation I served previously, there was a woman who came to me, and she came to me ostensibly for help negotiating with the library. She'd been banned from going to the library. Do you know how unpleasant you have to be banned from the library? She'd been aggressive, she'd been nasty. The library was literally her last human connection, though. And so she was understandably scared, upset. And I told her, well, there's not much I can do. I don't have any pull with the library staff, but I could help her make connections at church. She started attending on Sundays. After a week or two, she was welcomed into one of our small groups. Now, Sue Allard, a beloved member of this congregation who died in 2018, used to say, it's my favorite line of hers, some people just need a little extra grace. This woman, she was one of those people. Actually, she kind of needed a lot of extra grace, at least at first. She was angry, she was critical, she was defensive, she was full of complaints, full of misery. But as she began to form relationships, as people treated her with kindness and respect, she eventually began to respond in kind. Her whole demeanor changed. She started writing and sharing her poetry with the congregation, and it was beautiful and hopeful. She smiled more. She started to laugh a lot. She wound up joining the membership committee and being one of the people to warmly welcome newcomers as they came through the door to help them feel at home. It took a little over a year, actually, but she literally transformed from a person who needed extra grace into a person who radiated grace and generosity of spirit. Now, this is just one story. I could literally tell you hundreds more. I have a bunch of stories about the way relationships help raise people's awareness of systemic oppression. I've seen people transform from closed-minded and prejudiced to outright social justice warriors. I have a bunch more stories that showcase the power of relationships to free folks from structures and identities that had trapped them in lives that weren't true and real for them. So many beautiful coming out stories. No one wants to come out into a void, so having a supportive and accepting community is part of what makes it possible to become our true selves. Then there are countless stories about the way love and care help us process and integrate our grief and our trauma, enabling us first to continue to function and eventually, with time, to become wiser, more compassionate, and more resilient. Now, healthy, loving relationships begin with self-awareness. I think the more we understand about who we are and why we do the things we do, the more in touch with our own feelings, reactions, and intuition we are, the less we project on other people, which is what makes authentic connection possible. Now, there's a self-awareness that we develop over time, a sort of integration of our experiences into a coherent story about who we are and why we are. And then there's self-awareness that we cultivate in the moment. We can recognize and name for ourselves what's happening in my body, in my heart, in my mind right now, so that we can pause and choose a thoughtful response rather than reacting instinctively or habitually to situations that push our buttons. And let's be real, we all have buttons. Both types of self-awareness are essential if we want to form deep, honest, meaningful relationships, the kind that help us grow and change. I also think about grace. I think about grace. which I define as the capacity to accept myself and others as imperfect and complicated, beautiful and amazing. It can be so tempting to try and give advice, to try and fix or change or influence people, but all of those things are barriers to authentic relationship. When I think about what it means to be gracious, I think about people who maintain their composure and dignity no matter what they're confronted by. The people I admire most embody a bone-deep graciousness and are just as comfortable in a garden covered in mud as they are wearing black tie. There's a number of those kinds of people in this room. Marguerite was one of those people, for sure. The more we can find it within ourselves to have this kind of gracious spirit, the more we're able to create a gracious space, a space where people feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to share their true selves, to offer their deep stories. We all need places where we can slow down, where we can breathe, get in touch with our feelings, and share them. We need places where it's safe to speak our truths, even the hard ones. In addition to self-awareness and grace, another important thing to consider when we're contemplating what it takes to form those deep and transformative bonds, we need to think about trust. Now, without trust, without safety, people can't open up. But I don't think it's possible to require people to be perfect in order to be trustworthy. We don't develop trust enough to open by finding magical people who never make mistakes. We develop trust as we make mistakes in relationship and then find a way to repair and to keep going. Because humans are messy, and relationships are messy. Community is messy, and the messy places are actually the places where we can learn and grow. Those messy places are where creativity lives, and insight, and you guessed it, transformation. The central practice we engage in here at the UUCP to develop and restore trust is the making of covenants. We make agreements up front around how we're going to be together. When the covenants get broken or when hurt happens in spite of the covenant, we re-covenant, or we create newer, more specific agreements. It's our way of practicing not the golden rule, treat others as you would have them treat you, but the platinum rule, treat others as they wish to be treated. The important thing about covenants, though, is that they are made to be broken. They're actually broken all the time, intentionally or unintentionally. In all my years as a minister, I don't think I've ever met a UU who wanted to cause harm to another out of malice or meanness, but we all have blind spots and we all make mistakes. It's part of what it means to be human. So we have to be willing to move through conflict to forgiveness and healing. These are powerful and transformative conversations. It takes a willingness to speak up on the part of the injured party and a willingness to listen on the part of the one who has done the injuring. To listen, to let it in, to learn, and to change. It starts with a great act of courage. Brene Brown says the bravest sentence in the English language is, "You hurt my feelings." Then comes the second act of courage, an authentic apology. There are 4 steps to an effective apology. First, you have to acknowledge the hurtful behavior. So we can't just say, "I'm sorry, your feelings got hurt." We have to say, "I'm sorry I did the thing that hurt your feelings." Next, we have to demonstrate understanding and express remorse. So we say why what we did hurt the other person's feelings. Show that we understand why their feelings are hurt. And then we say, "I wish I had handled it differently." Third, we have to offer to make amends. Is there anything I can do to fix this? And last but not least, we have to learn and change our behavior going forward. And while we can sometimes get into explanations of why we did the thing in the first place, it's really important not to lead with that, not to lead with excuses. It's also important not to minimize the hurt that the other person is feeling. In other words, each of us needs to be willing and able to be held accountable for our actions. And for me, what makes it easier easier to be held accountable, easier to hear critique or criticism or other forms of feedback without getting defensive, is self-acceptance. I often call myself a perfectionist in recovery. If I don't have to be perfect, if I'm loved and lovable just as I am, then I can be open to the learning that comes from being in relationship with people whom I've let down in one way or another. Accountability also requires ample amounts of grace. If we want deep and transforming relationships, it also helps to work on learning to trust our own personal resilience. Rather than trying to avoid being hurt or hurting others, I find it helpful to remind myself that while hurt is to some extent unavoidable and inevitable, I do know how to heal. I've been hurt before and I survived. Similarly, my capacity to connect has only grown as I've learned how to take care of myself by communicating my limits and practicing a fiercer self-compassion. There have been times in my life when I allowed myself to be treated unkindly or disrespectfully. And when that happens, my core being, my soul, if you will, has closed itself off in response. However, as I said, I know that if I want deep and authentic connection, I can't wait for a perfect person or a perfectly safe situation where being vulnerable won't be a risk. It is always a risk. So instead, I have to trust and hone my own ability to protect myself from harm. There was recently a post on Facebook by an attorney that helped clarify for me what boundaries are and what they aren't. The author's name is Olivia Vizicero, and she wrote, "Boundaries are not demands, expectations, ultimatums, or idle threats. It's a particular course of action you take to take care of yourself when a particular set of circumstances arises." She went on and offered some concrete examples. It's not a boundary if you say you can't email me on the weekends. A proper boundary is if you email me on the weekend, I will not respond until Monday. It's not a boundary to say you can't talk to me like that. A proper boundary is if you talk to me like that, I'm going to hang up the phone. It's not a boundary to say you need to be more thoughtful and considerate. A proper boundary is I would like you to do these specific things for me, and if you don't, that's okay, but I will not invest more time in this relationship. In other words, we have to know our limits, we have to communicate both those limits and the consequences of not respecting them, and then if the line gets crossed, we have to follow through. Mind blown. I sure wish I had learned that particular lesson sooner. Despite our covenants and all our best intentions, the reality is that there are no perfectly safe spaces. But we make our spaces safer by being explicit about our expectations and norms, ensuring that everyone gets a voice in setting those expectations and norms, by honoring consent. We make ourselves safer by cultivating self-awareness, self-acceptance, and self-compassion. But we can't guarantee safety. That's not how it works, unless we keep this conversation on the surface and avoid all of our deep and tender places and just talk about the weather or whatever. Those surface relationships, by definition, can't be transformative. So we have to keep working to create safer spaces, spaces shaped by our covenants and our best understandings of what people need to feel supported. We strive to also create braver spaces where people are invited to be honest, to share their deep and tender stuff. Because these are the stories that shift our perspectives. These are the stories that change us. Courage can't be forced. We can't insist that people be brave, but we can lead the way. We can be courageous ourselves. We can open up. We can tell the deep truths, the transformative stories, and more than that, we must. How many of you have been part of a group where one brave person leads you in a spiral that goes deeper and deeper until those heart connections are rich and rewarding? Now, why do we do this? Well, we do it because we're human, and humans need those connections, those deep, authentic connections to survive and thrive. But we also do it because the world needs us to have those kinds of relationships. The work of dismantling white supremacy and other forms of oppression needs us to have safer, braver, and more gracious spaces where we can face the truth of our history and our present, where we can learn, where we can forgive ourselves. And in those spaces, our authentic relationships help us listen to the voice that lures us toward beloved community, helps us find our courage and our commitment. Or take climate change. People have been arguing about climate change for ages, and why is that? Why is there so much resistance to accepting the science? Well, psychologists have done some studies, and it turns out that, so these are the words of Dr. Renee Lertzman, one of the psychologists who's been researching it. What's stopping most people from accepting the reality of climate change is not lack of awareness, but in her words, the deep, unprocessed feelings of loss and anxiety that leave us feeling powerless and paralyzed. She calls this phenomenon environmental melancholia. Guess what the cure for environmental melancholia is? The way out of that place of grief and learned helplessness? Authentic, transformative relationships in safer, braver, and more gracious spaces. Supportive conversations with other humans enable us to face our feelings and process our grief and anxiety without getting stuck in denial or addictive behaviors. One more example, let's take poverty. It turns out that pulling oneself up by the bootstraps is not only physically, but metaphorically impossible. Study after study shows the importance of mentoring and coaching and societal supports. Turns out that having just one person take an interest, one person believe in you, listen to you, and offer encouragement and acceptance makes all the difference in the world. Transformative, authentic relationships. I would argue that social evolution, all of our good and loving personal and collective growth, consists of millions of these authentic, transforming relationships where little by little we figure out how to be human together, how to live in peace, how to create a society where everyone can thrive. So today I offer this invitation. Let's agree to be brave and honest and trustworthy. Let's commit to being gracious and curious and open to multiple perspectives. In a world where so much is broken and crumbling, let's double down on this really ancient technology that makes all the difference. Let's put all of our chips on love and connection. Authentic, transformative relationships have the power to heal not only our own spirits, but our world. So be it, and so may it be. I invite you to rise now in body or spirit. We're going to sing number 1007, There's a River. Please be seated. Our closing reading is An Invitation to Brave Space by Mickey Scott Bay Jones. Together, we will create brave space because there's no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we've all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and more love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. I invite you to join in our musical benediction, There is a Love. Please join me in the words to extinguish our chalice. Do you mind putting it out? We extinguish this chalice that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light our paths as we leave this place. May it guide our way until we are together again. You know, so Chuck, for the last week, has just been talking about the importance of sparking love everywhere we go. You can't talk to him without having him say he loves you. Usually multiple times. We don't say it enough. We don't say it enough. So believe me when I say, I love you. I really do. And I can't imagine people with whom I would rather be creating braver, safer, beautiful, transformative spaces. It's been a rough week, and I am sad, and I almost threw today's service out the window. Some days you want to just kind of sit in the front row and say, oh. But I'll tell you what, you know, we keep going. We keep going and we keep doing what we do because it makes a difference. It makes a difference in individual lives and it makes a difference in the world. Never doubt. Never doubt. I love you all. Go in peace. Come back next Sunday. Join us for coffee downstairs, etc., etc. Love you too.